This is the Greg Bedard Patriots podcast with Nick Cavins.
All right, Greg. So I'm sitting at my house last night before I go out.
I don't know if I want to hear the rest of the story. I don't know.
I'm perusing through Twitter, and I see your latest story pop up at BSJ, and I click on it, and I read it, and I'm almost beside myself because I'm like, wait a minute. Is this the Greg Bedard writing this about Mac Jones? Let's just say, if you haven't read the column yet, I'm sure Greg will share a lot of his thoughts here on this podcast. Let's just say that, Greg, I think you got Patriots fans all worked up in a lather about Mac Jones if they were reading your column. Let's just talk about some of your observations. Obviously, they let you through the gates. Congratulations on that.
Yes.
I'm glad that you were able to make it on through.
Thank you, Willy Wonka, as a.k.a. Stacey James. Thank you.
Stacey James gave you your golden ticket.
Yep.
So let's talk about Mac Jones and what you saw yesterday.
So we went out to practice, and look, this was put quotation marks around the word practice. I love how. So we got there. They kept changing the time, and we got there, and they were supposed to let us in, I think, about 11:30. I'm not sure ultimately what time it was, but they held us outside, and you could see they're on the field practicing. I think it was it was a little faster than walkthroughs, but it was offense versus defense. Of course, we didn't really even see that in our practice. It's just typical Belichick. He was speaking of, he's the real Willy Wonka. I think, I don't know if Matt Patricia's one of the Oompa Loompas or what the deal is, but that's his. Basically, Gillette is the factory, and he's Willy Wonka, and he does what he wants behind closed doors. And we got our golden tickets yesterday, so they let us in, and it was a glorified teaching practice. There wasn't any competition really. There were a couple sessions where the offense and defense were on the field. The quarterbacks mostly threw checkdowns, other than Hoyer went deep once. Basically, been like, I'm going to be only here for about a month, so I might as well let it rip. And he hit Nelson Agholor down the right side, so that was good. So, obviously, I was looking around, sort of seeing who was there. There were not a lot of veterans there. Some of the newcomers from free agency were there. And, just trying to size people up, seeing what kind of difference there is in terms of, how they look, have they lost weight, gained weight, that stuff like that. And then my attention quickly went to the quarterbacks. And this is what I saw. And I didn't go in with any preconceived notions. And I will say this off the bat, and I said this in my column. Look, who the hell knows what Bill Belichick's doing? But know this, he knew there was one practice this week. There's one next week, and I think the week after, where the media is going to be there. He could, if he wanted to, he could keep Mac Jones number 4 in the depth chart when we're there, and basically not let him do anything. That could be
Right.
his day to be number 4 and pick up everybody's helmets and stuff like that. I think it's interesting, and I don't think it's a coincidence that when we were there, yes, when they were just going through individual quarterback stuff as a group, he was number 4. But that was just, thrown to not even receivers, sometimes assistant coaches, things like that. But once they went to team, once they split up and did split reps, it was Cam Newton and Mac Jones with one group, and it was Jarrett Stidham and Brian Hoyer with another group. And that Belichick chose to do that in front of us, I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it's significant. Now, look, I could say that now, and then next week, whenever we're let in, Tuesday or what have you, Friday. I think it's Friday next week.
Whenever you get the message in the bottle.
Yeah, exactly. Mac Jones could be number 4. And, he could be like, look what Bedard wrote last week. I'm going to make him look like a jackass this week. And Bill can do that. He has done that in the past. So we don't know what's going to happen. But, Nick, I'll just let you know what I saw. First of all, Mac Jones is smaller than I think I thought he would be. Okay,
do you mean shorter, or do you mean kind of thinner up top?
Shorter. He's shorter. Look, he measured 6'2.5" at the combine. He's a legit 6'2.5". For some reason, I don't know why, at Alabama, watching the film and the TV copy of what I did, he looked to be a good size. He looked to be 6'4"-ish, sort of like Brady. He's not. He's no Brady physically. He's Yes, he has longer arms and longer legs, but he's surprisingly smaller than I thought. I think he's even a little bit smaller than Stidham. So, look, that's going to be a factor, I think. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a deciding factor, but it's one sort of factor in all this. Number two, he clearly throws the best ball out of the whole group. His spiral is consistent. It comes out of his hands quickly. I was surprised he sort of laid off the ball a little bit more than I thought he did, which is, if you're watching the video, it's, he kind of flares out with his hand before he throws. I didn't notice that on film. I noticed that here. It's not a big thing. It still gets out quickly. Cam Newton looked about the same. Yes, he looked like he had lost weight, which is something we talked about in the offseason. I had sort of 4 things that Cam needed to work on. Number 1 was trimming himself because it looked like his legs got heavy towards the end of the season, and I think that was a big issue. Secondly was the throwing mechanics. I don't think they're a whole lot better. We talked about in the last podcast about that picture that we posted. It looked exactly like Cam from last year, and he threw it exactly like Cam from last year. Floppy footwork. Yep. The shot. It wasn't as pronounced. I will say it came out a little bit quicker, but still, when they would go through, Josh McDaniels would have the quarterbacks be like, all right, they would each take like 3 or 4 reps throwing to basically different spots on the field. And when it got to the sidelines, that's when Cam got a little squirrely, especially to his right, which is what we saw last year, because he steps left, he throws right. And when you do that, hell, I'm a softball and a baseball coach. I know what that does. I coach my kids on this all the time. If you're looking at home plate from the pitcher's mound and you're pitching home and you step towards the first base side, your ball's either going to fly out to the right or you're going to pull it into the ground. And that's what Cam did last year. And that's what he did yesterday. It wasn't as pronounced. It was okay. Jarrett Stidham looked like an afterthought. Brian Hoyer's Brian Hoyer. So you put all that together, and that's the first thing that impressed me. But here's where it really impressed me, Nick. And all right, I was a little giddy leaving.
You a little worked up. You were a little worked up.
I was, and we'll get into possible reasons for that. But so they're going towards the end of practice. They're doing 11 on 11s, and it's basically walkthroughs. And they're going against other offensive players. So like Gunnar Olszewski's playing cornerback. Actually, he's playing slot cornerback. Okay. And that group is working off of cards, which is basically like they're working off an opponent. And there were a couple offensive guys with linebacker numbers on to identify the mic. And this was a little bit of a progression from what we saw earlier in practice. Like they were really trying to throw the seams, and McDaniels was trying to get the quarterbacks. And even Mac Jones messed this up once, where trying to realize, all right, if the linebacker does this to the person in the slot, then where are you going to go with the ball? And Mac Jones screwed something up earlier in practice. McDaniels coached him up on it. Then you come back, and this sort of brought everything home in the practice. And so Cam Newton gets out there. He gets under center, and you hear him, all right, 56 is the mic. Okay, fine. We understand. He could do that last year. Nick, you could do that. You could understand that basically when it comes to the Patriots, as far as I understand it, the offensive linemen are responsible for the 4 down linemen plus whoever the quarterback identifies as the Mike linebacker. And that could be anybody, depending on it. Could be a safety.
Yep.
And so it's the rudimentary, very basic part of this offense. And Cam did it last year. It's not that hard. So that was fine. And they run through it, and Cam throws a little bit late in the seam, and that's okay. So now Mac Jones comes up. He identifies the mic, but then you hear him say, 56 is the Mike Rita. Okay, that made me sit up a little bit. Okay, now he's tagging something else on to the mic call. It's not just a mic call. He's now telling the line to, or at least the running back or the line, to slide right on protection. Rita right, Linda left, or something along those lines. So I was like, okay, that made me sit up a little bit. And I'm like, okay, interesting. All right, now what happens? Okay, now it's Mac Jones under center. I think it was Nelson Agholor. It could have been Kendrick Bourne as the right wide receiver. And so Mac's looking over the defense. They're all looking over the defense. And all of a sudden, Agholor and Mac Jones look at each other, and Agholor points to the slot cornerback. And Mac does it. Mac just says, I know. And so then they snap the ball. That slot cornerback comes on a blitz, which we saw last year a few times with Cam Newton and him not exactly see it. What does Mac Jones and Agholor do? They both see it. Snap, boom, balls out, slant, probably like a 50-yard touchdown. It reminded me of like a Brandon Cooks play when he was here with Brady on a little slant that went, I think, for 50 yards, maybe a touchdown. I forget which game it was. So I saw that, Nick, and I was just like, that's the Patriots passing offense. Like,
right.
Thank you. Like,
that's what we've been waiting for. Yeah.
That's what we've been waiting for. That's what we've been talking about all season. That's what we talked about where Cam had problems last year, where it's like, okay, can he play quarterback? Yes. Can he run? Can he complete some passes? Can he operate the offense? Yes. But does he have the potential to use the Patriots passing offense to its full operational strength? And the answer has been a resounding no. And I still think it's a no. And to me, Mac Jones is the only person, with talent on the roster to do it. And so what I saw yesterday got me excited. Look, I don't know what's going to happen. Who knows what's going to happen? But I will say this, Nick. And this was not in my column. I had already written my column. But, I'm on my way home from practice yesterday, and I know people wouldn't get back to me. But, text some Patriot sources, be like, so I texted one of them, and just to make sure I'm in, the ballpark of where I should be.
Right.
And I texted one of them, and I said, look, I know it's just a May practice, and it wasn't really even a practice. But holy hell, Mac effing Jones. And all I got was and I got a winking eye emoji back, basically being like, yeah, you saw that right. So, look, I don't know what's going to happen. It's May. A lot can happen. He could get the Jarrett Stidham Memorial hip pointer tomorrow and be out and be on the bench for the rest of the year. But I'll tell you what, Nick, where Cam is, so this was our first time seeing Cam, where Cam is, where Mac Jones is, where he can go with the playbook. Before yesterday, I didn't really think there was a chance that Mac Jones was going to start till maybe the midway point of the season. Maybe. It depended on how things went early in the season. I now think that Mac Jones has how do I term this? I think he has a decent chance to start the opener and be the quarterback this season. I don't know if that's going to happen. I could be totally overrating this. I could have beer goggles at 2 a.m. at your bar in Hampton. I could have some old lady hanging on me. That kind of thing, back in my day, way back in the day at Rutgers. I could have serious QB beer goggles on. I don't know, maybe, but that's the way I felt yesterday, and that's what I wrote. And I think it's pretty accurate. I think that Mac Jones is ahead of schedule. Now it's just a question of when he arrives.
When Mac Jones was drafted, the way I'll put this is, when there's a first round pick, a lot of times you try to find that guy's superpower, so to speak, right? You feel like they will have at least one superpower to bring to the table. And Mac Jones's superpower was his processing ability, his ability to learn, pretty much his football IQ. That is his superpower. He's not going to wow you with his size and his frame. I'm not worried about it overly. He's not 5'11". And, I just think the size, he's obviously smaller than Tom Brady. He might be slightly smaller than Jarrett Stidham. I'm a lot less worried about that than I would be if he's struggling to throw the football. He's struggling to see things. His superpower is football IQ. And so when you describe what you just described to everybody, this is what you have to think about. Cam Newton has been in this offense now for about a year, right? He got a late start last season, but he went through the training camp they had that was condensed. He went through the season last year. He's had all off season to keep his eye on the playbook and work on things while Mac Jones was, going through the draft process and didn't have an idea he'd be playing for the Patriots and all of that stuff. Jones just got his playbook a month ago, and he is already doing things that the quarterbacks that have been in this system for much longer seemingly can't do. And I think if you are a Patriots fan and you go into this season thinking, well, Mac Jones's superpower is his football IQ. That's what I've been told. Not an electric arm, not an incredible athlete, but it's his football IQ that is going to make him a franchise quarterback. Then yes, listen, it's one day. We all understand that. But what you see is you see elements of that football IQ already paying off. You see the glimpses of the superpower.
Absolutely. I mean, I completely agree with you, Nick, and you're right. Quarterbacks all have their different strengths and weaknesses. To me, give me the mind, and we could figure out things physically. But I think that Jones, where he is really good. I think they're quietly is. And look, we talked about this right after they drafted him, where some people were poo-pooing it and saying like, well, the Patriots fell into it, and how much did they really love him, and all this bull crap.
Yep.
And I told you from people that I talked to, and look, I understand because I talked to people right after that, and I'm like, well, why aren't you guys more excited? Like, what's the deal? Like, you got this guy's perfect for what you guys do. Like, why are you, Belichick downplayed it. People I talked to downplayed it. And what I got was, there's an enormous amount of respect for Cam. And they might need Cam. Look, you never know what's going to happen. Let's say it is Mac Jones, but what if he gets hurt? You're going to go to Stidham? You're going to go to Hoyer? Wouldn't it be better to have Cam Newton around to say at least run you through like squeak through one win, mostly running the ball and being conservative with the passing offense? I think so. So there's an enormous amount of respect for Cam. We saw, his influence even on the Julio Jones stuff. And so, nobody in the immediate aftermath of the draft, no one was going to dance on his grave or anything. And nobody knew what was going to happen. Who knows? Mac Jones could have showed up 350 pounds. You don't know. I mean, it's true.
He got into the purple drink like Jamarcus Russell all of a sudden.
Trust me, if he was on the Hightower post-draft plan, he would have been a little hefty when they were not happy when Dante Hightower showed up here after the draft because some of those Alabama guys like their food after, a lot of guys go through this. They cut weight for the combine and stuff like that, and then they have a little barbecue and things like that, and look out of control for some guys. But anyways,
they get a little loose.
Yeah, I digress. But nobody was going to dance on Cam Newton's grave. They didn't know whether there was going to be a grave, but I could tell you that there is a quiet confidence about what Mac Jones is doing. Now, look, at the end of the day, if Bill Belichick doesn't think it's wise for the team to start Mac Jones week 1 or week 4 in Sunday Night Football against Tom Brady, maybe he says, you know what? Let's wait till week 5. I don't know. So we don't know. I can't tell you today that he's going to be the opening day starter because Bill Belichick can do and does anything that he wants. But I will tell you, Mac Jones is on a good path. There's a quiet confidence inside the building about him. And we will see how this progresses week to week. We have, I think, 2 single practices the next couple of weeks. Then we have the 3-day mini camp before the break. I think it's the 14th through the 16th, somewhere around there. And then there's the break, and then we come back for training camp. But for where I saw him, especially, I've seen a lot of rookie quarterbacks, undrafted guys, rookie quarterbacks, decently high picks from the Packers, the Dolphins, the Patriots. Garoppolo, he's way ahead of where Garoppolo was and Stidham were. Of course, they came from simplified passing offenses. But for where he is right now as a rookie quarterback, he is ahead of schedule. Now it's a question of when's he going to arrive.
Yeah, and one last thing, it was one practice, as you said. We've given all the disclaimers. But I was surprised how Belichick approached this, and I was wrong. I thought we talked about this earlier in the week. I thought he would treat Jones as the
mushroom.
As the mushroom, right? He was just going to kind of let him be the fourth guy, like you said, grabbing helmets, doing not much of anything, especially in front of the media. Behind closed doors, when the media, the closed practices, that's different. But when you've got the guys out there and you're able to talk about it and write about it, and you're able to film what's going on, I thought we'd see a lot less of Mac Jones, frankly. I thought he would be squarely in the 4th spot. So I do think that's a nice little nugget to what happened yesterday. The second big story at the practice yesterday was the fact that there were so many guys not there, Greg. I've
Yep.
heard and read that there were 25, 30 dudes who weren't there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was surprising to me to see a Patriots team that most of the time before the quarterback decided to take that his family was more of a priority, or so he said. It was stunning to me that there were probably less than 60 Patriots players on the field for an OTA practice. And it's everybody from Judon, Phillips, Gilmore, Sonny Michel, Damian Harris came on late but didn't do anything. The two starting quarterbacks, J.C. Jackson, and Stephon Gilmore, Devin McCourty, even Chase Winovich wasn't out there. Draft picks Barmore, Stevenson, no Hightower, no Jonnu Smith, no bookend tackles, and Isaiah Wynn and Trent Brown, Lawrence Guy. It was a mess. And so I mean,
Who
I remember
was
when they started practice, I was like, they broke up into positions, and I'm like, wait, what the hell? What position group is that? There's like two guys over there. And I was like, oh, it's running. I saw Ivan Fears. I was like, oh, it's running backs. And I was like, who the hell are those guys? And it was Tyler Gaffney and it was JJ Taylor. And so
Nice.
that was interesting. I will say, while we're here, and look, I don't know the reasons. I'm not gonna have any guesses. I'm not gonna make any judgments. Whatever, it's voluntary. I did ask Bill Belichick in the press conference specifically about Hightower, and while he didn't address the question directly, which he never will, I took his demeanor and what he said, which was basically like, even the guys aren't here. We're expecting them to play this year. I took it as, because I asked him, I said, do you have any reason basically to think that Dante Hightower will not be on your roster or what have you? And he was basically like, he looked like, yeah, we expect him to play as far as we know. So that was good. But, yeah, I'm not going to make any big judgments out of this. If they didn't have to be there and they weren't, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a lot of this across the NFL. And
Yeah.
obviously the one that is glorified the most is Aaron Rodgers, because he's out there in Hawaii drinking wine, playing acoustic guitar, singing karaoke, and the videos are going viral. And, Rodgers, he had never missed an OTA in his career. And so he's not there. The top 5 wide receivers of Green Bay, they're not at OTAs. So this is happening throughout the league. I would not read too much into it. It's the tug of war that you and I discussed earlier about the union and the NFL. The union wants a lot less off-season work. They want more homework, so to speak, than actual work on the field. And there's a lot of teams that are acquiescing and they're changing the way they run stuff. And, Washington is one of those teams. Washington pretty much, canceled OTAs and they're moving up the mandatory, I think, minicamp is what they're going to do, something like that. So Ron Rivera is changing the program in Washington. This is happening throughout the league. I would take a deep breath. I don't think it's that big of a deal. One guy I did want to ask you about is Nelson Agholor, because I read some things. And listen, I don't want to go crazy, but you talked about Jones and Agholor on that play, the slot corner blitz. They were on the same page. It would have been a big play. I did read some things yesterday on Twitter, some observations from guys that were there watching, that Agholor had a pretty good day. He might have even looked better than people expected him to look. What'd you think?
Yeah, I thought he looked good. Out of all the receivers, he was the one that sort of popped off to me. So, yeah, I thought he looked good. I thought he played fast. He definitely played it, or at least he looks like he plays at a different speed than, say, like a, Philip Dorsett or even a Damiere Byrd, guys who are known to be fast, but don't really play that fast. They don't play up to their speed. And Agholor looks like a guy who plays faster than his time speed. I thought Bourne looked fine. Also, I thought Hunter Henry looked solid, even though, to be honest, he didn't really pop that much to me. I'm not saying anything negative about him. I think other people remarked that they thought he looked really good. I just thought he looked fine. I will say the new tight end that they just signed, I forget what his name is, but he looks like strictly a blocking option. He does not have much juice down the field. I will say the two guys who stood out the most to me, other than Mac Jones, and I would probably put Agholor number 2, was J.J. Taylor, the running back. I think he's one of your guys. JJ was a guy who impressed last year, especially he's surprising. He may be really small, and he is really small. But he catches the ball extremely well down the field. We didn't really see that today, but just in terms of the way he moved, and he looks like he added some upper body strength. His legs look humongous. He looks like a little bowling ball. He now looks like Mini Mac Heron. Like people referenced Mini Mac Heron last year. Now JJ Taylor looks like Mini Mac Heron, and which is a good development because James White, he was one of the guys who didn't report or at least wasn't at practice yesterday. He's in the final year of his deal. It was even iffy whether he was coming back here. So that's good. And I will say the other guy who stood out to me, and look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I studied the kicker reps at all.
Oh boy.
Because but they were kicking on the field closest to us, but there was work going on, more important things to watch. But every time I looked over, this dude was popping the ball all over the place. I mean, in a good way. He was launching the ball. The ball was coming off his foot. Every field goal was like almost through the top of the crossbars. Was this undrafted free agent Quinn Nordin? I don't know his deal. I mean, I think he's from Michigan. He was the only undrafted free agent. But I'll just say, Nick, you've probably heard this because you know a lot about sports. But there's certain people when they do things, when they hit a baseball, when they and it just sounds different. When they hit a golf ball, there was a young amateur golfer that I heard at a tournament that I was covering. I could hear her from the parking lot hitting on the driving range, and it was just different. She went on to have a very good LPGA career, even though I can't remember what her name is right now. No, it was a little bit before that. My wife would know because my wife was playing in that tournament. But there's just certain when you're around fields and courses and things like that, hockey arenas, slap shots.
Yep.
Things just sound different. And the ball off of Nordin's foot just sounds different. It just does. It makes you pay attention. Look, I don't know whether he can hit the broadside of a barn. I just thought it was interesting for one day. I was like, hey, who the hell is that 61 kid who keeps killing the ball? Well, that's him. Something to monitor.
Yeah, Quinn Nordin from Michigan. I watch him a little bit. I happen to have a buddy of mine that is a hardcore Michigan fan, so I've actually seen him kick sometimes at games. It reminds me, though, of the story of like when you hear things, it reminds me of my buddy Zoe. If you catch a football from Zoe or if you're in the parking lot, and when he whips it, the ball actually whistles. Like when you you have a Nerf ball that whistles, you're like, oh yeah. No, Zoe's football, literally to this day, as he's in his 50s, sorry, Zoe, his football whistles as it comes at you. It's almost terrifying how it's different. Let's jump to the BSJ member question of the day. Check them out, $39.99 on the annual plan. Of course, top-notch analysis of all the Boston pro sports. If you're a Pats junkie, then a membership at BSJ gives you access to a ton of video analysis that Bedard does on the coach's film and direct access to the man himself in weekly chats. This is another one when you tell me, Nick, don't worry about it. I will find the question. So, Greg, what question did you find?
So, Mikey D asks, if we assume Cam is the starting quarterback for the start of the season, how hard is it going to be for this team to transition from Cam's offense, bully ball, to Mac Jones' offense, Pat's traditional offense in midseason? This is something we've been over before. This is something I've ridiculed Tony Maz about over and over, and I will continue to. It's not a different offense. Look, it might be a different game plan. It's a different strategy against that opponent. But in terms of, like, look, let's take, for example, for Hunter Henry or Johnny Smith or Nelson Agholor. Like, say 1 week Cam Newton is the starting quarterback. Well, the tight ends know they're going to have to block a little bit more that week. And maybe Agholor doesn't have that many deep routes. Okay? Say Cam Newton gets hurt, and the next week, well, now they put in the game plan where now Nelson Agholor, there's a few more deep shots in. The tight ends are in the seam a little bit more. It is not a big deal. It is zero deal. People need to stop asking about this. People need to stop bringing it up. And Mike knows I love him. And he's one of our best members. and he's been very supportive of the site and continues to be. And he's great. And he's one of the people that I consider confidants that I ask questions about the site, and I have sort of a sounding board of members, and Mike's a member of them. So he's going to take this in stride the right way. And this really isn't aimed at him. It's mostly aimed at, hi, Jimmy Stewart, Maz and Felger and Murray, because they keep perpetuating this stuff. And then I keep getting questions. Like, educate your audience, okay? So that they ask smart questions. Don't make them dumber, okay? And so this storyline is a dumb storyline. And I'm done talking about it. Like, it's not two different offenses. It is the Patriots offense. It is just structured differently, especially in the run game. Even Mike Lombardi said the running game is different. But the passing game is the same. It's all the same. It's just how it's dressed up that week for that opponent. And it doesn't really matter who the quarterback is. So it's not going to matter. It's not a Mac Jones offense. It's not a Cam Newton offense. It's a New England Patriots offense. It has never changed. It is always going to be the same as long as McDaniels and or Belichick are here. And it will be a complete non-factor when it comes to switching between quarterbacks this season.
Mike D. Reminds me of the Beastie Boys. I'm Mike D, and I get respect. Your cash and your jewelry is what I expect. I'm sure Mike D will be okay with it.
He knows.
The Greg Bedard Patriots podcast with Nick Cattles. That'll do it for this episode. Everybody enjoy your long Memorial Day weekend. Be safe. Have fun. We'll be back early next week to talk more Pats. Until then, be good.